Today we're learning Lil Nishmas Adir Chava Yehuda Kirp's father Chaim Moshe ben Yaakov, the schus of the Torah of the Shir, and his son Neshama should have an Aliyah. Okay, we're up to Kuf Zayin. Today's daf is Kuf Ches. We're up to Kuf Zayin, and we're discussing Halah, the Indian of Halah and Shchita Schutz, and where the lines get wide, you count up about a few lines, 6, 7 lines, you go Itmar. Itmar, 10 lines up. Itmar, first word in the line. Hamayla bisman hazeh. Let's say bisman hazeh, person builds a mizbeach and brings a carbon, it's makdash a carbon, and he brings the carbon. What's the din? Would be over on halah b'chutz or not? Would be over bisman hazeh and halah b'chutz. Now, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayiv. Rabbi Yochanan says you be Chayiv karis v'halah b'chutz. Reish Lakish am a pata, and Reish Lakish would say what? You're pata. Rabbi Yochanan Chayiv. Why? Kedusha Rishayna Kitchel L'Shaita v'Kitchel L'Asalavai. The Kedusha that was infused in Eretz Yisrael. There's two Kedushas, Eretz Yisrael, and there's Kedushas Abayis. So his Kedushas Abayis was Kitchel L'Shaita v'Kitchel L'Asalavai. Memela, even though there's no Beis HaMikdash, there's Kedusha, and therefore if you go ahead and bring a carbon or bachutz, Yemaila bachutz, you be chayiv. That's the shita of Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish am a pata. Reish Lakish says you pata from karis because kedusha mishayna kitchel l'shaita v'loy kitchel l'asad. It was only at that time, and it wasn't l'asad lavai. Memela, there is no isawat of halah bachutz because there is no bachutz. Name, let us say the plukta the Rebbe Lazar, Rabbi Yeshua kemiflaki. Let's say machloikis ta'amaroyim, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish is machloikis tanoyim, Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yeshua. We'll say it's contingent upon we're going to sit. Nine. We have a Mishnah in Idias. Rabbi Eliezer. Kishayu boinin behechel. When Ezra came and they rebuilt the second bias. So let's think about the hechel. That's the kodesh, and there's Azara. Kishayu boinin behechel hayu oisin koloyim behechel, right? Koloyim bazaros. So they put curtains around what would be the heichal, and curtains would be the azara. Ella shebe heichal, when they were the heichal boinin mebechutz. You know, they don't want the workers to be inside the kodesh, guys, right? So when they were building it, they put from outside. So they put the claim outside. Uba azara boinin mebefnim, and the azara. So therefore, they were built from the inside. So the heichal they're building from the outside, from the inside. The point is, like Rebbe Lazar, you had to build walls. Like Rebbe Lazar, you had to build walls. Rabbi Yeshua, Shamat, I heard, Shahoyu Makrivim, Afal Pishein Bayel. I heard by Ezra, throw the hats, guys. I heard by Ezra that they brought Kabbanis. I heard by Ezra they bought Kabbanis, even though there was no walls. Now, guys, so what do you see? What did Rabbi Yeshua hold? It must be Kedusha Rishayna, Kitcha L'Shaita, Kitcha L'Asalavo, because even without walls, yes? Even without walls. V'oichel Kachim Kedashim, they ate Kachim Kedashim, Afal Pishein Kloim, even though there was no curtains. Kachim Kalim U'Maisa Sheni, Afal Pishein in Chayma. Why? Why were they able to do this? Kedusha Rishayna, Kitcha L'Shaita, the Kitcha L'Asalavai. Now, Rabbi Yeshua says they were doing all of this without walls. When Rabbi Eliezer they put up kloyim and they were building walls, it must be what he held, that Kedusha Rishayna, the Kitcha Shaita, for like Kitcha L'Asalavai, because you couldn't do anything till it was rebuilt. Right, that's what we're saying. You couldn't do anything since it was rebuilt. So Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Yeshua, and Reish Lakish holds like Rabbi Eliezer. So the machloikis amarayim we can say is a machloikis tanoyim. Machloikis amarayim we can say what is a machloikis tanoyim. So the Rebbe Lezer Saba like Kitcha Amalei Ravina Ravashi Memai. How do you know? Dilma the Kuli Alma. Maybe everyone's of the opinion Kedusha Rishayna Kitcha L'Shaita v'Kitcha L'Asalavai. And even Rabbi Eliezer would hold that. Even Rabbi Eliezer would hold that it was Kitch L'Shaita because I so obviously telling you about that you had to put up the walls. So obviously you had to put up the Klayim. Umar my deshmiele kamar. Umay my deshmiele kamar. Each one was reporting what they heard. In other words, Rabbi Shamati, guys, Rabbi Shua said, Shamati, I heard they brought Kabbanis. Rabbi Eliezer says, Shamati, that they had Klayim up. So they were not telling you this sheet is what they hold. right? Rabbi Eliezer can also hold that what that kitchel l'shayta v'kitchel l'avay, and he heard they putting up walls. Now the question is, so why were they putting up these curtains then? In other words, good, that's what he heard, but he was reporting it. So obviously, if they put them up, it must be because loy kitchel l'avay. That's why they're putting up the curtains. The chitema koloyim Rabbi Eliezer lamali. So why would they need the curtains? If you're telling me that what kitchel l'shayta v'kitchel l'avay, why was it necessary to have these curtains? And for Gemara Litzniusa Ba'alma is that what the workers shouldn't go ahead and be looking at everything. It's Litznius, or people shouldn't be seeing the workers as they're working. It's Litznius Ba'alma. But Enochinami, both can hold Kitchel Shaita, the Kitchet La'asad Lave. So therefore, but in other words, the Machlokes is the Machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan says you b'chayev ha'lo b'chutz b'zman hazeh, and Rabbi Shlaka says you pata. But to say it's a machlokes tanoim, you're not locked into saying it's a machlokes tanoim. It's no guarantee to say it's a machlokes tanoim. Itmar hamayla ve'ein boy kezayis. You know, it's the shear of being maila, being makriv b'chutz is kezayis. Now in the meat you don't have a kezayis. The etzim mashlima lekazayis, but you have a bone that's attached to the meat, and that bone is mashlim the shear to a kazayis. That bone is mashlim the shear to a kazayis. Now, Rabbi Yochanan Machayev, you be chayev halah. Reish Lakish pata, you be pata. What's the svaras hamachlekes? Rabbi Yochanan Machayev chiburi oilin ka'oilin. These things that are attached, right? They're considered like part of the ka'oilin is ka'oilin. Dummy. Reish Lakish Amar Pata. Chiburi oilin is not koilin dummy. So Rabbi Yochanan says that the etzem is considered what? In other words, there's no mitzvah to bring the bone, right? There's no mitzvah to bring the bone. So therefore, chiburi oilin, the chibur is something that goes up, is considered oilin. Guys, that, in other words, there's no, if, we had the Gemara earlier, if the etzem is separated, you don't have to burn it, right? If the etzem separated, right? So you're going to tell me chiburi oilin, the chibur to something that's oilin is koilin dummy. Memela, I'll treat the bone like the oilin, like what? Like the meat. Reish Lakish is of the opinion, no, is lav koilin dummy. So it's separate, and therefore I won't treat it koilin, and therefore you won't be chayav for halah. Therefore you won't be chayav for halah. Okay. Boy Rava, Hamayla Roish Ben Yoina, She'ein Boy Kazayis. So you have oila sa'oif, and you're outside, and you go ahead and you mile it. So there's a din on birds also of halah b'chutz. There's a din of what? Of halah b'chutz. However, it doesn't have a kazayis. Umelech mashli mele kazayis, and the melech, the salt, will go ahead and it'll go ahead and make the shear of a kazayis. So in itself, in other words, so we had the machloikis by what? By bone. Now we have the same shaila, but instead of bone, you have salt. Instead you have salt. Why do you pick a bird? So you would say in Sfara that a bone is more shaykh to being what? A part of the halah than salt. What about bechol carbon takriv melach? Bechol carbon takriv melach. I'll tell you a very nice word from Rav Gifta. Now that the Bechora, you're not allowed to put anything on a carbon, or anything sweet, anything on a carbon. Why are you able to put on melech? Why is not? So melech enhances what's already there. Melech is, we know melech. It's so it's like it enhances it. So it's not considered a separate thing. Adarabba, it makes it better. But again, so we're going to see in the Gemara, but there's such a svara. That's really the dialogue over here. Avrami, this is not a menu with this is Zevachim. We're not discussing food. I know. All of a sudden, food. When we're discussing building the base Hamikdash, the retired contractor didn't open his mouth. As soon as he got the food, shine. So shine. There you go. Yeah.
Now we know why it doesn't show that.
Okay. Anyway. Amle Rava. Amle Masrika L'Ravashi. Lav Hainu Pluktayid Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. In other words, isn't this the machlokes like Rabbi Yochanan that a bone is part of it, the melech also be part of it? Like Reish Lakish that the bone is not part of it, the melech might be part of it. Let's say it's the same machlokes. Says the Gemara, no, it's not true. Reish Lakish Tiboil Rabbi Yochanan, it's a shaila like Rabbi Yochanan, but Tiboil Reish Lakish. Tiboy Rabbi Yochanan, Ad Kamloi Kam Rabbi Yochanan Hasam Ela Etzem Demina Basu. This is Dov Svara. Dov Svara is the what? That it's mini basa, that the etzem is it's meat, it's fleshix, right? It's part of the carbon. Aval melech, the lav mina, that's what Dov meant. I mean, it's not part of it, right? The Bayoinahu loy, that's a light Rabbi Yochanan, maybe he would say melech, right? Dov, this is your svara, right? That it wouldn't count. Tiboy Reish Lakish, Ad Kan Leikum Reish Lakish Hasam Eladi Parish Mina Lav Mitzvah Lasuke. You know why he held the bone was not part of the carbon? Because if it separates from the carbon, you don't have to bring it up. Aval Hacha the Parish. Let's say it gets unsalted. What do you got to do, guys? You got to resalt it. Over here, Mitzvah Lasuke, right? You have to put more salt on it. So Dilma Loi, Dilma Loi Shna Teku. So no, it's Melech. It bleibt schwer. In other words, I could go as far as both ways. The first way I could say, Rabbi Yochanan would hold that what? Rabbi Yochanan would hold that by bone, that's part of the min. That's why melech, that's part of the min. It would not be mitzdaref. Reish Lakish would say bone is why, because if it separates, you have to put it on. But melech, which you have to go ahead wide and put it on. Well, no, there's no difference. And the Gemara said therefore the Gemara applies teku on the shaila of melech. Rabbi Yosef Glili. Now let's meet Rabbi Yosef Glili. Let's re-meet him, guys. Let's go back to the Mishnah, right? On Kufav. Hashaykh me'mayla b'chutz chayiv al hashchita v'chayiv halo. You chayiv for shchutei chutz, and you chayiv for what? For halo b'chutz. Rabbi Yosef Glili Omer, shachad b'fnim v'helo b'chutz chayiv. If you shachad inside v'helo b'chutz, and then you do halo is outside. However, shachad b'chutz v'helo b'chutz. If you shecht outside, v'helo b'chutz is potter. You potter on the halo. Shaloi helo ela dava psul. You only went ahead and something was puzzle, guys. What was puzzle? Right? It was shutei chutz. Since you shechted it outside and it's puzzle, memela, when you're going ahead and you were mila, you were makriv, you were makriv dava puzzle. Amrullah, the Chacham said to Rabbi Yosef Glili, afa shloichid umayla b'chutz, even someone who shloichid b'fnim, he goes ahead what? And he shechs on the inside, which is okay, and his mayla b'chutz is not okay, kimishot tziu pasloi. Guys, isn't every carbon puzzle, but once you bring it outside, of course. Not Kachin Kalam after this Rika, Shiloh before this Rika. But again, so guys, you hear? So guys, we have the dialogue now. Let's go outside. Let Rabbi say Glili, he wants to say, Shchita b'chutz v'lo b'chutz yipata. Why? Because since you shechted outside, it's puzzle. Said the Chachamim to Rabbi Glili, what are you talking about? If that's the case, the puzzle, every halo b'chutz is going to be puzzle. Because once you took it out of the kachim, it becomes puzzle v'yitzah. So l'chayra, you can't be right. Ela must be chutz b'chutz also is chayev. That's the dialogue. Now we're going to have two tanoim coming to go ahead and fataych Rabbi Yosef Glili. You're going to come to the aid of Rabbi Yosef Glili. Good. Rabbi Yosef Glili. Heishav Rebbe tachas Rabbi Yosef Glili. So Rebbe, guys, is going to answer the chilik between a regular carbon and shchutei chutz when you shecht it outside. Mal shoichet bifnim umayla bechutz shahoyis aloi shasa koisha. Toma b'shoichet bechutz umayla bechutz shahoyis lo shasa koisha. Guys, I'm asking. Guys, eye contact. I'm asking 1,000% when you take it out, you have a psul yaitza. Did you have a moment when it was kasha? Of course you did. When you shechted it inside. When you shechted it outside, did you have a moment that it was kasha? No. So says, this is Rabbi Yosef Glili, this is what Rebbe is taining to the Chacham is taina. There's a big difference between the psul of yaitza, why you chayiv, and the psul of chutz, where you pata, according to Rabbi Yosef Glili. Why psul yaitza, when it was inside, and mamish was a kosher carbon. If you felt it was a kosher carbon inside, even though now you have a psul outside, since it had that time, it was kosher, the mele halah is going to be chayiv. Masha'en came when you shechted it outside, there never was a moment where it was kasha. That would be what Rebbe is answering, what Rabbi Yosef Glili would tie it back to the Chachamim, the chilik between Yaitza and the chilik between Shchutei Chutz. Heishav Rebbe Lazar Rebbe Shimon, Tachas Rabbi Yosef Glili, another Gedoylei Tanoim, Rebbe Lazar Rebbe Shimon, coming to answer Rabbi Yosef Glili, Mal l'shoichet b'fnim u'mayla b'chutz shekein kodesh mikabloi, right? Shoichet b'fnim u'mayla b'chutz shekein kodesh mikabloi, right? If guys, what does that mean? Dim alu lo yardu. Guys, psul yaitza. You bring it back inside, you bring it up. You know what? what goes up stays up. What goes up stays up, right? Good. So now, that's the mila mashen kain. Tayim b'shoiche b'chutz she'ein kodesh mekabloi, right? The kodesh will not take it b'chutz. So memela, Rabbi said the shas koisha. Rabbi Lazar b'shimon is saying that what im alu lo yardu. Good. So those are two reasons why shchute b'fnim is, even though it's possible when you take it out, is better than shchute chutz, which never had a shas koisha. My binayu. Amaziri shchitas laila ikabinayu. If you shechted it at night, right? You would be makabel, but it doesn't have a shas kaisha, right? If you shechted it at night, it's not a good carbon, guys. But it would have what? It would have a shas kaisha. It would have, excuse me, if it goes up, it stays up. That's the. So according to Rebbe, if you shechted it at night, and you brought it, and then you brought it outside, you'd be pata. You'd be pata. Like Rabbi Lazar of Shimon, you'd be chayiv because im alu lo yardu. Im alu lo yardu. Again, I gotta make sure I said it right the first time. It doesn't have a shasa kaisha because it was never kosher at night. So therefore, like Rebbe, that depended upon shasa kaisha, there's no difference like Rabbi Yosef between shchutei chutz that you shechted outside and shechting it at night. If you would be mila b'chutz, you'd be pata. Like the svara of what of im alu lo yardu, in this case, im alu lo yardu. If it goes up, it stays up. That's the difference according to what? According to Rebbe. Rabba Oma, according to Ziri. Rabba Oma, Rabba says, Kabbalah bikli choyel ikabinayu. Whether you in makabel the dam in a kli choyel, right? So if you makabel the dam in a kli choyel, what do you have? Shasa koisha leka. You don't have a shasa koisha. Because, and therefore, what if you makabel in the klichol and you brought it outside, right? It would be what? It would be pata, but like that all the lo yardu. Since in this case, if it goes up, it stays up. You'll be chayiv for halah b'chutz. The chayiv b'chutz. Just 1 second. Okay, the last part of the Mishnah was tummy. Let's go to the Mishnah now. Let's go back to the Mishnah before the Gemara Kavav and Aleph. So we brought this in, agav that machloikis between Rabbi Yosef Galili and the Tanakama vis-a-vis shchit v'chutz v'ala b'chutz. So we bring this in Tumah. Hatamei she'achal bein kodesh tamei bein kodesh tahor chayev. If a kohen, let's say a person is tamei, a person's tamei, or it could be any person. It could be a zar, it could be a kohen, and they eat kachim. That's tamei. Yeah. Whether the kachim is tamei or the kachim is tahar, they're going to be chayiv kares. Guys, you hear this chiddush? You're going to be chayiv kares for what? For eating kachim, even though the kachim is tamei. Says the chachamim, if you're tamei, you're out. You're chayiv kares. That's the chachamim. Rabbi Yosef Glil no. Tamei shachal tahar. If the kodesh is tahar and the person's tamei, then chayiv kares. The tamei shachal tamei pata, and tamei that eats tamei, then he's pata. Why? Because he's pata. Well, ella davet tamei. So amaloi af tamei shachal esatar kivin shenagaba. I don't understand. You're tamei. This is kachim that's tahar. You're going to go ahead and touch it. You're going to make a tamei. So it's the same thing as you as soon as you take the kachim out, you have the as soon as you touch it, you tamei. So that's why we brought this in. It seems to be the same parallel in the case. Okay, we're going to get into a very, very interesting sugya. Okay, let's do it outside. There's a sugya of issa chalal issa. One issa can be chal on another issa. Can an issa be chal on another issa? So usually we say not, with the exception of there's issa meisif, issa kailul. If the second issa is going to be meisif, more of a punishment. Let's say the first issa is malchus, and the second one is, let's say nevela, chaylev on nevela. Nevela is malchus, chaylev is karis. So that's an issa meisif. You're getting more. Good. The second one is an issa kailul. So the issa kailul would be that, let's say you're tamei, right? You're tamei, and the kachim's tamei. So if you hold ein issa chalal issa, so in mela, if this is tamei and I'm tamei, this is not chal, provided this came first. What happens if you hold a issa kailul? Now, if I was tahar and this is tamei, once I became tamei, not only am I also on this piece of meat, I'm also on kailul every other single piece of meat in the world. So it incorporates all of it. With that in mind, let's begin. Okay, so again, what's machlokes? Rabbi Yosef Glili says, tamei who eats tamei, you don't get karis. The chacham say, tamei eats tamei, you do get karis. That's what he said. Tamei eats tamei, gets karis. Okay. Says the Gemara, Shapik Amalei Rabbanan Rabbi Yosef Glili. Chayri said very good that if you're a Tamei person and you're going to touch the meat, you're going to be Tamei the meat. So every Tamei person that eats Torah meat is eating Tamei meat, and yet you're Chayev. So how can you Rabbi Yosef Glili say Tamei is Pata? Amarava Kol Heicha did Nitma Tumas Haguf. Any case where you, the person, was Tamei first, the Achkach Nitma Basar, then Kuli Amalei Pligi Dechayev. Shekain Tumas Aguf Bikaris. Guys, even Rabbi Yosef Galili would be Moida. Guys, what happened? First, Harry became Tamei, and the meat was Tahar, and then the meat became Tamei. Even Rabbi Yosef Galili would say you be Chayiv Karis for that. Even Rabbi Yosef Galili would say you be Chayiv Karis, since your tumor preceded that. At that time, when you were Tamei, there was Chal and Isra and you eating this meat. And afterwards, that comes about, you don't say it's, you say it's a Chal Isra. Ki Pligi. B'shenit basa. First the meat became tamei. B'shenit basa. First the meat became tamei. The achkach nitma haguf, and then the person became tamei. Good. So now, guys, which issa came first? The meat. Yes. So here's the shaila: is the issa tuma that came on the person afterwards chal on the meat or not? Again, where the person's tamei and the meat is tahar. Issa, and then it became Tamei, Issa Chalalissa. The Issa of the person was Asa on the meat when it was Tahar. Even when it became Tamei, the Issa that existed is Chal on the Issa of the Tumah, of the meat. However, when the meat came first, the Issa came first on the meat, it was Tamei. And then afterwards, the person became Tamei. That's where the Machloikus between Rabbi Yosef Galili and the Chachamim is. Now, the Rabbanan Savri, the Rabbanan hold that Yechayev Karis, Amrina, and Migu. Now, this migu is not, koyach hataina. This migu means, it's a long Rashi here, this means isachal liska. Migu, now when you become tamei, you can't eat anything in the world. You eat, also, it's koilel this as well. If you're tamei, could you eat any kachim? Is there a lot of Torah that could kachim?
Yeah.
Yes. So since you're also on the Torah that could kachim, it's koilel what? That piece of tamei meat. That's the koilo. That's what the Chacham hold. Rabbi Yosef Glili Sava lo yamrina migu, and Rabbi Yosef Glili says you don't say it's the koilo. You don't say migu that this is also that's also. So that's the machloikus between the two. So when the Mishnah says Tami shachal Tami is a kodesh, it's speaking in a case where the meat came first. It's speaking in the case where the meat came first. If the tumah of the person came first, in that case, no. In that case, the person will be chayiv kares, even according to Rabbi Yosef Glili. Okay. Now, Rabbi Yosef nehi de migu lo yaminon. In other words, you don't say it's a koilo. Teisei tumas haguf de chamira v'tochel al tumas basa. Now, guys, tumas basa, if you eat, I think it's a malchus. The machloikus. I think the machloikus in the third parak in Makis, but it's Makis. Tumas haguf is chiyav kares. So, according to Rabbi Yosef Glili, the isser of the meat came first. But there still is a more severe Isra over here. You added on the Einish of Karis to what? Good? That's the Kasha. Well, it's not really Moisif a little bit, just it's a Chumrah. Ravashi, Mimai de Tumas Haguf Chamura. How do you know Tumas Haguf is Chamur? Dilma Tumas Basa Chamura. Shekain Ein Leitara b'mikvah. The person that's Tamei, he can get the mikvah. Meat, you can put it in the mikvah all you want. When it's Tamei, it's Tamei. So therefore it's Mochamer. So therefore you don't have what? You don't have such a svara. Okay, that would be the machlekas. Says the Mishnah. Choyma b'shchita shchita miba aliyah. That's the lashon how to read that. You have a chumra. You have a chumra b'shchita miba aliyah. There's a chumra that shchita has over halah. Again, we're discussing the isser of shchutei chutz, which is the beginning of the parsha in Zion. And the second parsha is the meaning of halah, burning it bachutz, and we're discussing that. Where's the chumrah that shchita has over aliyah? Uba aliyah min b'shchita. If you go ahead, you take a kachim and you shecht it lehedyet. You shecht it for you don't shecht it to Hashem. You don't shecht it to Hashem. You'll be chayiv. You'll be chayiv. Let's see Rashi for a second. Allah lehedyet pata. But if you burn a carbon to a hedyet, you pata. Says Rashi, mishum alos chutz. you'd be potter on the Isra of Vayikru Yud Zayin of Halas Chutz. That you'd potter on. However, v'chayiv mishum oived avodas kechavim. Guys, if you're bringing a carbon outside, not for Hashem, then you're bringing it for somebody else. So we're just saying the inyan, the Isra of Halah b'chutz Vayikru Yud Zayin, you would be potter. You'd be oived avodas zara. V'im heizib avodas kechavim v'shokib Halas Chutz. And if you did it b'meizir avodas kechavim, you were shoyg Halas Chutz. And maybe I'll shigagase chatas. You won't be in Issachar. You won't be a chatas b'shoygeg. And the Gemara will explain. Okay, so we have the chumrah of shchita is that no matter whether you shecht it for outside for Hashem or you shecht it for a hedyet for a person, you be chayiv for shchutei chutz. Hamayla b'chutz you be potter for what for halah b'chutz you be chayiv for what for avodah zarah. Now that's the chumrah of shchita. Choyme ba'aliyah. What's the chumrah of aliyah over what? Over shchita. Choyme ba'aliyah is shnayim she'ochsu b'sakin. Two people who are holding onto a knife, v'shachtu, and they shecht p'turim. You have the guys. We have it by Shabbos the p'tur shnayim she'osu, right? Shnayim she'osu the p'tur. So over here, if two, we're gonna have a lima, we're gonna have a pasuk to teach me. If two people take a sakin and they shecht outside, they're potter from shchutei chutz. They're potter from shechting a carbon outside the Beis Hamikdash. However, achsu be'aver the helu. If two people hold on to a limb of an animal, the helu, and they go ahead and they throw it up on a right chayavim, you be chayiv. So that is the chumrah, but that's the chumrah that halah has over shchita. Shnayim shasu would be chayiv. Hela chazav Allah. If you do it a few times, chayiv kol aliyah. You chayiv each in one. We'll see what Reb Shimon, Reb Yossi Yomer, and chayiv alachas. And the Gemara will explain the machlokes between Reb Shimon who says you chayiv each and every time, and Reb Yossi says you only chayiv once. You have to build a mizbeach. Even if you bring it on a rock, or a stone chayiv, you don't need to build a mizbeach. Okay, so what was the first thing? There's the chumrah that shchita has over what? Over haliyah. That shchita, even the hedyet, even if it's not for Hashem, you be chayiv. If you have a carbon, you shecht it outside, I don't care what you shecht it for. If it's a carbon and it's outside the Beis Hamikdash, you're chayiv. You're chayiv, I don't care. Hedyet. Whereas it's supposed to what? Now, we're familiar a little bit with the parsha of Yud Zayin. Right? We're familiar a little bit. We still have it over here on the screen. Okay. It says Dichsiv la Hashem. Guys, what does it say by halah? What does it say by halah? Va'aleim toimar ish ish mi Yisrael min agera sheigor b'soichem asher yala oilo oizavach v'pesach amoy lo yivienu lasoi soy, and you bring it lasoi soy, and el pesach amoy lo yivienu lasoi soy la Hashem. Of course, on the chart over here, we're missing the one word I do need. Can you see this anyway? Can you see this, guys on the screen? Do you see a Gemara? You see Psukim? You see a pasuk? Okay, good. Okay, the Pesach Omoy Lo Heviu. Okay, and it says over here somewhere. It says Lashem. And missing. Here it is, guys. The Pesach Omoy Lo Yivinu Lasa Yisrael Lashem. You can barely see it. It's very small. Okay, now you can't see it at all. Okay, I'm assuming that you know this parsha already, so because I'm not going to refer to it anymore. Okay, so now it says Lasas La Hashem. So when it says by it says La Hashem. So Mameli Yipata because you were miled to a hedyet. B'shchita nami yaksiv La Hashem. The Pesach Omoy Leviu. It also says La Hashem. So in other words, just like the Torah of Allah, because it says La Hashem and not a hedyet, so by Shchita it says La Hashem, not a hedyet. It says Hasam da Makra. By Shchita it says Ish Ish. It says ish ish, meaning an ish that shechts to an ish. Guys, ish ish. An ish that shechts to an ish. He's not even shechting to the Rabbi Shalom. He's shechting to another ish. The Yechayev. It says by Shkutei Chutz ish ish. For the Gemara, Gabe Halal also ksiv ish ish. It says that as well, so you should be chayev. So for behedyet, be boyle le shnaim shehelu be'eva chayev. Ish ish, two guys. It's teaching me that two people who do it yechayev. Guys, Guys, if you're telling me that ish tells me the halal, two people who do it a chayiv, so the ish by shkita should also tell me two people are chayiv. And you said you pata. And you said you pata. So you're telling me ish is to tell me ish even if you shech to an ish and not God you chayiv because it says ish. Fred the Gemara, it says ish by halal. No, by halal, ish should tell me two people are chayiv. If that's the case, use the ish by shkita, that two people are chayiv, you do the shkita. On that, the Gemara says you can't say that. Shani Hasam, the Amakra, the Nichras Ha'ish Hahu. Guys, Hahu is what? One guy. Hahu Echad, V'leishnayim. The Gemara Hachi Gabi Alon Hami Yaksiv Hahu. It says Nichras Ish Hahu. In other words, we have the same Lashonis, so why would it be different? You're telling me you have a Miyat, Hahu, and not Ishish. By Halah also you have Hahu, and not Ishish. Yet you're using Ishish for two, and the other one you're telling me one is only B'shchit is one. Ahu mi boile, I need ahu by Allah, amidbeis, lemute shoygeg, honest umutah, to exclude a case where a person is shoygeg, or he's an honest and makes a mistake. Taisis, top Taisis, you'll see yourselves. It's important Taisis. Ilachi, hachanami, as well, by shchita mi boil mute honest shoygeg v'tah, says the Gemara, this trey hahu ksivi. It says twice, it says, dam yichoshev al ishahu, and then it says, v'nichas ishahu. In other words, by shchita, guys, I have two ahus. So one is going to teach me only one person who does it, and not a bunch of people, not two people. And I'm going to use one ahu to teach me that oinus. So show you mutar will be pata. Velo Hashem lamali. So what do you do Hashem for? In other words, fellas, it says that Vel Pesach you didn't bring it to serve to Hashem. How can you tell me that b'shchita lehedyet b'chayev it says Lashem? What do you use it for? We use it l'sei mishtaleach. That if you the same mishtaleach, you be pata. In other words, if you go ahead and shech the same mishtaleach after it's outside, you would be pata. That's what I would use it for. Okay. Chayme b'hala. The chumah of Allah was what? That two people who do it together, you will be chayiv. Tan Rabbanon, ish. Ma tamalayma, the Rabbi Shnaim she'achzu be'ever v'helu shechayavim. Sheyachal, I would say yipata. I would say two people yipata, so you need a pasta to tell me chayiv. V'lei dinhu. Uma ha-shoichet lehedyet. Shechayiv. Shoichet lehedyet yechayiv. Shnaim she'achzu b'sakin. V'shachtu peturin. By a shoichet bachutz. Lehedyet chayiv. And two people do it on the same with the sakin as pata. V'shachtu peturin. Hamayla lehedyet shepata. A mile lehedyet is pata. Einay din sheshnaim she'achzu peturin. In other words, I have a kal v'chomer, it should be pata. Guys, outside. Ma'adach shchita, which is chomer that two people who do it is chayiv. Nonetheless, right? Nonetheless, excuse me, ma'adach shchita, which you do lehedyet, you chayiv. Two people do your pata. Hello, but you do your hedyet is pata. Ain't I din if two people should do it as pata. So the svara is it should be pata. On that, the Gemara says tamalema ishish. Therefore, I need a pasuk by Allah to tell me two people if they throw it on the fire outside on a mizbeach yibichayiv. Divrei Reb Shimon. These are the words of Reb Shimon. Rabbi Yossi Aimer, hahu echad v'lo shnayim. Right? Hahu, it says v'nichus hahu echad, one person v'lo shnayim. And came mat tamalema ish is divrei Torah kolashim b'nei adam. Is divrei Torah like the Torah speaks about the kolashim b'nei adam. So ishish is no drasha. Reb Shimon hay hahu that it says by halav v'nichas hahu mi boilei lemutei shoyeg oines mutar. Reb Yossi may hu when it could have said hu when it says hahu he darshans the hay and the hu. Reb Shimon hu hahu loy darshi he doesn't darshan it. Reb Yossi mi the ha ishish dibetar kleshim adam then ish by shchita nami dibetar kleshim adam. Guys by shchita guys we learned that ish. What does that mean? An ish that shechs to an ish is chayiv. But you said by halal, ish is just the Torah's way of speaking. If you're telling me the ish by Allah is the Torah's way of speaking, it must be ish by shchita is also the Torah's way of speaking. So lo Reb Yossi, how do you know that yeshech lehedyet yechayiv? Again, one more time. We began this segment of the share. We began this segment of the share when it says ish It means a ish that shechs to an ish b'chutz yichayev. Even if you didn't shech to Hashem, yichayev. Good? Rabbi Yossi had the same lashon by halah, and he said dibur Torah lashon b'nei. In Cain, you can't go ahead and departmentalize and say it means this way over here. It's got to be universal. So if ish is by halah is just the way the Torah is speaking, hu adin ish by what? By shkita. Memela is a kashle Rabbi Yossi. Where do you know if you shech lehed yichayev? You don't have the source that the Gemara offered before. Says the Gemara. Where does Rabbi Yossi know Ashaycha the head Yechayev? The Chayev Nafkale mi dam yichoshev layihishahu dam shafach. It says he spilled blood. Vafilo Ashaycha lish. Even if he shechted what to a person, even if he shechted to a person, it's going to be Chayev. So we said hella because of a hella. We had a machlokes. So Shimon says if you do it multiple times, you're going to be Chayev, and according to Rabbi Yossi, you're going to only be chayev once. You're only going to be chayev once. Okay. Let's look at a chart before we see the Gemara. I sent it out. Let's look at a chart before we see the Gemara. You should have it on. You're on the chat. It's on the chat if you have your phone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, that's the one. That's the one. It hurts.
I didn't know you borrowed Heshi's phone.
But it decides to talk to me all the time.
You were missing it the other day.
Oh.
Okay, guys. So we're gonna have machloikis between Reish Lakish, the first chart. We're gonna have machloikis between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan as to where this machloikis between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yossi is. Good. According to Reish Lakish, that machloikis is by daled v'hei varim. So you have an animal, it's cut up in pieces, and you're throwing it up piecemeal. Like Rabbi Yossi, you only chayiv once. Even though it's 4 or 5 pieces, you only chayiv once. According to Rabbi Shimon, you be chayiv in each and every one. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you chayiv on each and every one. There's no machloikis there. In other words, Rabbi Yossi would be maida in a case of 4 or 5. You be chayiv in each and every one. That's bedalad v'hei. What? It's one aver. You do one aver 4 times, right? You do it 4 times. No, you don't throw it on once. You throw it each piecemeal. So Rabbi Lakish says you be chayiv once, and Rabbi Yochanan says, according to Rabbi Yossi, you be chayiv once, and according to Rabbi Shimon, you chayiv on each and every one. So that's the machlokes. Let's see it inside. Says the Gemara. Hella b'chaz v'hella. Amar Reish Lakish machlokes bedalad v'eivarim. 4 and 5 eivarim. The Rabbi Yossi is of the opinion kiksiv lasais oisai. Right? When it says lasais oisai means ala shalem. Ala shalem chayiv. Ve'en chayiv ala chaser. You chayiv what? Only on one hole, on a kol behema ksiv. It's written on a whole behema. So therefore, Rabbi Yossi says you be chayiv once. Umas savar. Rabbi Shimon says a kol eva ve'eva ksiv. It's said on each and every aver, and therefore you be chayiv. Aval aver echad. Let's say it's one aver. You bring part by part. In the first case, you bring all 4 parts at the same time. Over here, you bring it 4 or 5 times. Guys, you see the machlokes? Guys, look at the chart again. The first column is you're doing 4 or 5 avarim at once. The second one, you're doing it 4 or 5 times. You're doing the same aver 4 or 5 times. Good. You only chayiv once, right? What? No, the question is, how do you darshan the chaser? You darshan the whole animal, you darshan piecemeal. If it's a whole animal, you don't chayiv the whole animal. It's not a svara. It's how you darshan the isai. When it says isai shalem, does it mean in gansin or it means piecemeal? Okay, Rabbi Yochanan Amar machloikis be'aver echad. Machloikis is one aver. The masav Rabbi Shimon holds mukterei panim shechasru the helu b'chutz chayiv. Guys, let's say you were inside. Let's say, guys, you were inside, right? And a piece came off the mizbeach. It's chaser because it's not attached to the other piece. You put it back up. So he holds if something's missing, and since you put it back up inside, who adin if it comes outside, if it's missing, you be chayiv in that case. Umasava and reisisava pata, you be pata. Avadalad hey varim, but if it's 4 or 5 avarim, divrei kol chayiv, I'll call aver ve'eva. So now you have the chart in front of you. There it is. That's the machlokes contra Reish Lakish. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it's chayiv on each piece. According to Be'evrecha Daled Heiponim, there Rabbi Yochanan says the Machlokes, and Rabbi Reish Lakish says once. Upligi the Ula, and they argue on Ula. Dama Ula, Hakol Moedim b'Mektarid Pnim Shechasru v'Helo b'Chutz. Everyone's moida on an animal that you shechted inside, and you burn partially inside. If that's right, we burnt inside, and then it's mechusar outside. Yechayev. Why? Because since an inside, you put it back on the mizbeach. Who are then outside? We had this Gemara before. You shechted it outside, and you hala outside. The masa of a patu, masa of a chayev. That's ula. So el chayra, they're arguing on ula. Ikadi army, oma ula, hakol moedim. So this is the second chart. This is the second chart. Rabbi Yosef Shimon, okay, you burnt it inside, and it's missing outside. According to the first lashon of Uli Yechayev, according to the second lashon, it's machlokes. If it's outside, that's machlokes, and according to the second lashon, Yipata. Ula. Everyone, even Reb Shimon would say Yipata. Like nechlu el makturi pnim shechasru ve'ela b'chutz. That was inside. It was, and again, we write on the mizbeach, and if it's missing, it will be chay. You have to put it back off. Ve'ela b'chutz. The masa of a pata, masa of a chayev. Upligi da Avu de Shmuel alishna kama de Ula, and Avu de Shmuel argues in the first lashon of Ula. The Amar Avu de Shmuel kiman madrinan poikin legabe mizbeach kiman the like Rabbi Yosi. Not like Rabbi Yosi, according to Lishna Kama. According to Lishna Kama, you be chayiv, and according to Lishna Kama, guys, look on the chart, the first column. Lishna Kama de Ula, you be chayiv, and Rabbi Yosi, according to Avu de Shmuel, Rabbi Yosi would say yipata. Guys, according to Avu de Shmuel, Rabbi Yosi is saying yipata. So if you see the word chayiv over here, guys, you see it where I'm circling. You can't see I'm circling, but the guys that chayiv, Avu de Shmuel says Rabbi Yosi would say yipata. So obviously he argues on that then. Okay, you got to know when to go fast, fellas. This is time to go fast. Okay, now let's finish up. Now, the final machlokes is that if you need a mizbeach or even a stone, if you need a mizbeach or a stone, that was the final machlokes between the two. According to Rabbi Shimon, even a stone. According to Rabbi Yosi, only on a mizbeach. You need a mizbeach. What's the machlokes? My time Rabbi Yosi needed a mizbeach. The by even though mizbeach Lashem, Noah came off the Taver and he built a mizbeach. Rabbi Yochanan, my time Rabbi Shimon, that a stone. It says by Manoach. Guys, a little background. Malach shows up, tells Manoach's wife extra credit. Who remembers the name of Manoach's wife? I'll give you a hint. It's in Baba Basra Tzadik Aleph. Okay, it's Hatzlalaponis. It's the same daf of Avram's mother, Masloi Bas Karnavo. Guys, you have to know this. You know what? I was in girls' clinic all the years. This was the Chidon question at the Beis Yaakov convention. One year, I gave it to the girls. They came up and they won the convention on that answer. They came back. They were nuts. They were calling me. They went around that. I said, no. I said, thank you, so jingle. No. Anyway, right? So Hatzlalaponis. That was the name. Anyway, the Malach shows up. And tells Hatzlalaponis, you're going to have a child, and this child you won't be able to eat the whole time you're pregnant. You can't drink wine and everything, and he can't drink wine. He's going to be a nazir for the rest of his life. And Manoach hearing this says, I got to speak to this guy. I never heard such a crazy thing in my life. And he comes back, and then they went ahead and he offered on the rock. They offered a carbon. So you see that you can bring a carbon chutz. And again, this was at the time of the Mishkan. It was the time of Heter Abamis. The Abamis were permitted. This is after the destruction of Shiloh, which was B'mei Eli. Bamas were not permitted. This was before the destruction of Shiloh. Eli was after Shimshon. Okay, so I guess Harasha. Even though so you see, you put it on a rock. What does Reb Shimon do with the raya of Reb Yosi by even Mizbech Lashem? Who is Gavaya Ba'alma? That was just a raised platform to make it easier. In other words, didn't have Kedushas Mizbeach. It simply was to make it easier. What does Rabbi Yosi do with the raya of Reb Shimon? Harasha. So there you go. It's a Rasha. Guys, got it? You know why it's a Rasha? Because it was B'shas Isra Bamis. It was Bamis for us at the time. So therefore, it had to be a Rasha. V'ibay Seima, Hainu time of Shimon, Kitanya, Shimon, I'm Mizbech Pesach Oil Mayed, They Mizbech Bebama. This din Mizbech is only Pesach Oil Mayed, They Mizbech Bebama. The Fikach Hel ala Sela, if you're being a carbon on a Sela, Ayala Evan Chayiv. What do you mean Chayiv? Yotzmi Boile. Chayiv, Yotzmi Boile. Since it's permitted, you should mean not Chayiv, Yotza. So, Hachi Kamal, the Fikach B'Shas Isra Bamois, therefore, at the Shas of Isra Bamois, Heta Bamois, of course you can bring on a rock. Therefore, b'shas isra abamis, even if you bring on a rock, you're going to be chayiv because you don't need mizbeach. Hela ala sela 11 chayiv. By Rabbi Yosef Rechanina, Keren, the kevesh for yisoid v'rivua, ma'usha yaakov b'bama. By a bama, do you need a keren? These are ma'akiv by the mizbeach. A keren, a kevesh, a ramp, yisoid, a base, rivua, square. So that's by mizbeach. What about a bama, a private mizbeach? Do you need these four entities or not? So Amalei Rabbi Yirmiyah, Tanya. Keren v'kevesh reivu of yisoid ma'akvim b'bama gedola. The bama gedola that was in the Mishkan, that is it's the communal bama that was ma'akiv. They ma'akvim b'bama ketana. It's not ma'akiv the bama ketana.